Polls show that human beings' greatest fear is not death. It's not clowns or psychopaths, snakes, spiders, heights, which are all dangerous scenarios. In fact, people's generally greatest fear is public speaking. So today I'm going to go over how to face your fears and tell you some stories on how I face my fear as it relates to public speaking. And it turns out that public speaking is not life or death, but in people's minds, psychologically, we believe that being judged or outcast from our social group, or that the opinion of others in some ways can be a worse scenario than death. Because in ancient societies, when you did something that would cast you out from the group or not have you fit in, or you spoke your mind or an opinion, the idea of being in solitary confinement or banished or shunned from your group, which still happens in today's societies like the Amish, is a fate worse than death. In fact, when you think of biblical stories like Cain and Abel, when Cain killed Abel, his fate was not, smite. His fate was not being stricken by lightning or death. His fate was to wander the earth aimlessly without his brother. So what I want to provide value with is some of the frameworks and ideas that I have that have worked for me. Maybe they'll work for you. Maybe they'll help you on how to deal with this fear of being judged, fear of public speaking and putting yourself out there. If you're a business owner, if you're an athlete, if you want to increase your quality of life when it comes to relationships, everything that you want is on the other side of fear. So the three stories that I'm going to tell today are: number one, my acting career; number two, my mixed martial arts career; and number three, the times I've experienced loss. So the first story is when I was in college. I went to college with the full understanding and inclination that I was going to spend my post high school years joining the wrestling team with the intention to become a wrestling coach. At first, I wanted to be a high school teacher. So I was no stranger to the anxiety around performance and being out in a dual meet where it's just you and somebody else with the spotlights on both teams, the auditorium, watching you. And if you won or you lost, both ways were your fault. And losing in front of an auditorium of your friends and family in wrestling can be kind of embarrassing, to say the least. There's a lot of negative emotions, I'm sure, that whatever you're wrestling as you're watching, just imagine being in a spandex, losing in front of your friends and family. That was a known anxiety that I wasn't super out of comfort zone. What was the most terrifying experience in my college career was when a friend of mine who was in the theater department decided to sign me up for Rocky Horror Picture Show. Rocky Horror Picture Show was a play that occurred every year in our school, in which they would live stream this like 1970s movie and have actors play it out. It always sold out. It was a full auditorium, called 1,000 people, roughly, maybe 500-600 people at the minimum. And I was volunteered to play the monster, so Rocky. For those of you who are not familiar with the Rocky Horror Picture Show, look it up. Rocky's role is to be on stage for an hour and a half in just your underwear, in golden underwear. So I said, you know what? You're a good buddy of mine. Shout out to Ethan. I'm going to do something outside my comfort zone, and I'm not going to let my friends down who they're counting on me to show up at the stage. So I had one option, which was to show up and do my thing. And the way that I thought about this was, one, I was asked to be there, so I was wanted to be there. It wasn't like I was imposing my underwear, my basically naked body in front of this auditorium of people. Two, I've never acted before, so my expectations for my performance were not super high, and most of the people didn't actually know me. They weren't in the wrestling team. They weren't in the crowd that I hung out with prior to doing this, prior to that year. And number 3, I thought, well, there's people that are paying money to see me in my underwear. So if anything, it's all PG-13. There's nothing's wrong with that. So if anything, what's to be ashamed of when, no one's forcing them to see me? When I was out on stage, I looked out in front of the audience and I just pictured everyone else in their underwear too. I was like, yeah, we're all just me in our underwear. In wrestling, it's pretty common to do group showers in the locker room. It's just locker room talk. And when you think of an entire auditorium, that put them in the same box, that they're all in their underwear too. When you think about that, you're not singled out, which in that case I was singled out. So you're just on stage with a group of peers that are just like you. So that was the first way that I dramatically had to conquer stage fright, quite literally on stage. Second story, bit higher stakes, seemingly there's a trend here, was when I decided I want to be a cage fighter. So I wrestled all the way growing up. I always liked to play contact sports, wrestling, football, rugby. Did some amateur boxing, not sanctioned, but with friends. And I always had the idea in one way or shape or form that I had more in the tank for competition. So I was removed from wrestling for about 2 years, haven't competed in a martial art really, signed up for Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and I decided I was going to take a cage fight. And in so doing, the 2 to 3 month camp, for those of you, like, it's harder to go from 0 fights to 1, I believe, than go from 1 to like 10. So everything was new for this unique experience of cage fighting. Yeah, I've done weigh-ins before, but it was all different. There was media. I had to take pictures in basically my underwear for the fight poster again. And these pictures were going to be promoted online and on fight posters and all over. And I had sold about 100 tickets. So people paid, 100 times to see me under the lights on my first cage fight. And in cage fighting, the stakes are that you could get knocked out or hurt in front of your friends and family. So you could get embarrassed. And I thought, the anxiety for performance and making sure that they got their money worth, and I put on a show, and I didn't get hurt, and my parents were there, my mother and father, didn't want them to have their anxieties come true. There was a lot of pressure to perform. There was also quite literally cameras and bright lights and roaring drunk fans, booing and cheering and screaming, a high emotional moment. So if you've ever watched the movie Wolf of Wall Street, you'll notice Matthew McConaughey doing a chest bump. I did that beforehand as my own personal unlock, to flip the switch, so to speak, in my own brain, that it was showtime, as a anxiety reducing ritual. For some people, that could be cracking their fingers or playing with their hair. For me, it was beating my chest. And the frame around this MMA cage fight. Now, I did win that fight, and it was a great celebration, but the adrenaline dump, I didn't sleep that whole next of the day. I had so much adrenaline and so much anxiety built up. But the idea was that until the bell rung and somebody actually punched me in the face in front of my friends and family, I realized then, I'm not made out of glass. It'll be okay. You know what you signed up for. Getting punched in the face is part of it, and you actually don't feel it while you're underneath the lights. So in that instance, you can't win a fight unless you're willing to get punched in the face. And unless you're Bo Nickel, and I think even now he got punched before, but very rarely do successful pro fighters make it through their career without getting hit at all. So you just anticipate and expect to get hit, and then realize on the other end that it's not fatal. And even getting knocked out, spoiler alert, is not the end of the world. So bracing for being punched in the face and having it happen and then knowing what that feels like on the other side has helped tremendously in my life experience to conquer my fear of public speaking or performing in public, period. In the last instance, which surprises me, but now it doesn't, when people are not afraid of death as much as they are public speaking, imagine the worst thing that could happen to you. And then imagine it becoming real and visualize what you would do and how you would react and how you would feel in the moment. So for me, a couple years ago, I had a call from my brother that my mother was killed in a car accident. Probably the toughest 24-hour period of coming to grips with someone who died randomly. It was about as close to me as humanly possible, my mother. And then know that I was basically in charge with my brother and father, but a lot of it was on my plate to coordinate and run a funeral. Which, for those that never had to have this occurrence or whatnot, just know that it's an event. It's an event marketing. It's an event. There's a lot that goes into it. And in so doing, not only was I public speaking in front of hundreds of people, but I was speaking on the most emotional topic, which was losing my mother. So I had to have that experience, and I had to realize that once you've lost something so dear, the frame of, well, what are you going to do to me now? And if someone judges you for your performance on public speaking and one of your most vulnerable moments that is sincere, and you're just paying homage to someone that matters the most, which could be your mother, your father, your daughter, your brother, your sister, your family member, like nothing really matters. Like no one else's opinion matters nearly as much to me as much as like my close related family, my mother specifically. When you have that voice in your head that says, oh, you're not good enough, or you can do anything you set your mind to, or you're impatient, or you have the skill or you don't have the skill. Typically it's one person's voice, and in my case it was my mother's. So removing her voice from the equation made it so that my fear of judgment from others just kind of dropped to the floor. And I spoke in front of my friends and family and those that attended the funeral, and I was prepared. And I realized after that public speaking engagement that, well, that was the hardest thing I can think of ever having to do. And the anxiety when it came to doing sales pitches, when it came to doing content, when it came to running my business, compared to that was nothing. It's like, what's the worst you're going to say? No, I don't like your pitch. Okay, well, my mom can't die again. So that might sound morbid, but it's kind of liberating at the same time. And when you imagine the worst thing that can happen and make it real to you, then the second worst thing that can happen really loses its teeth. Doesn't sting nearly as bad. And when your mother or your father or whomever that voice is that's your conscious that kind of helped you through development to determine right, wrong, or in-group acceptance or not, is no longer there, you're free to express yourself and be yourself without any, fear of abandonment. So to cap off this pretty tough talk on facing your fear in public speaking, I'm doing solo content. This is a cakewalk compared to what we've done before. Am I a UFC champion? Hell no. Am I a motivational public speaker? No. But do I have any reservation about going out and spreading a message, putting myself out there, marketing? No. You're not going to punch me in my face. I'm not doing OnlyFans. You're not going to kill my mom. What's the worst that's going to happen? I get some dislikes on my YouTube. Don't care. So that's my brainstorm of the day. Keep on sending it. Face your fear. the memories that matter, the people that matter, the experiences, all that you want in your life will either support your message, support what you're creating, support your expression, or they won't. And either way, you'll be fine. So go out and send it. And as always, if you enjoy these brainstorms and these rants, send me a message. Let me know. Share it with a friend. Come on, let's interview you. I'm Ross with Thunderstock Marketing. Out.